Hello everyone. Chapter 1 begins with the essential mating patterns, classic constructions that every chess player must know. Recognizing these patterns will help you convert advantages with confidence and spot tactical opportunities in the real game. We'll start with one of the oldest and most striking motifs, Damiano's mate. Damiano's mate, it's, as we mentioned, one of the oldest and one of the most frequently happening mating pattern that exist. For this motif, it is extremely important to control the h7 or h2 squares, often by the pawn on g6 or pawn on g3, or supported by the knight or the bishop. The combination often or usually starts with the rook sacrifice. So, in this first example, we can see that all those conditions that I talk about are met. The pawn on g6 lends fantastic support. It is taking away f7 and h7 squares. We have an open file for our rook, but if we pay attention also to our opponent, we can realize that black's combination, or better to say, good coordination of his major pieces on the queen side, are also threatening to deliver checkmate in one move. So we have to be faster than our opponent. Chess is timing, as Bobby Fischer used to say, and let's see how this is done on the board. So white's combination starts with rook sacrifice, rook h8. Black has nothing better than to capture, there are no other moves, and white can give this check queen h2. You see, so white has basically lured the black's king to an open h file, and now the queen is able to join the party with a tempi, so-called forcing moves white is using for his own attack. Black needs to go either king g8, either queen h3. This will just prolong the game for one more move, and after king g8 we have a mating on the board, so-called Damiano's mate. Let's go to the next example, where we have already much more complicated situation on the board. You see, we have much more pieces on the board, but there are some extremely important similarities to the first example. We have a pawn on g3, which lends support again on this h2 square, and also taking the f2 squares away from the white's king to escape. And black, of course, can continue with the attack or with the combination on the same way as it happened in the first example. So we give first check, now we sacrifice the first rook. In order to give a space to another rook, we again give this check on h1, king takes, and finally Her Majesty is able to join the party. Queen h8 check, king g1, and after queen h2, again mate on the board. You see, so basically the idea is the same as in the first example, even though we can see that on the board the position on the board was much more complicated in sense of the quantity of the pieces on the board. Okay, let's go to another example where we have white to play. So in the first two examples, we could see that the mating construction was basically already created. The pawn has been placed on important g6 or g3 squares. Here in this case it's not yet. Again, like in the first example, black threatens with mate on b2. We are also down on material because black has extra exchange, meaning they have the rook versus our knight. So taking all those elements in consideration, what can we say? It looks like white is in big trouble. Yeah, that would be the case if this typical Damiano's mating pattern would not exist. What you can learn also out of this example is that any position first must be looked through tactical point of view, because tactics are often shortcuts to either win or lose the game, and we can of course improve, let's say, our chances by using tactics. Yes, our material deficit and also other problems could be deal with tactical shots. You see, knight g6 move here put black under severe pressure, because it is double attack, and black has nothing better than to take on g6. Otherwise they lose the queen, and after h takes g6, you see we have basically built the mating construction. Yeah, this pawn on g6 is playing extremely important role yet again. After king g8 we give this check, takes, queen h1, black must cover, we take, and after king g8 follows queen h7 mate. The position on the board that we can see, it's the most complicated among all we have seen so far. Black's position is good, however, we need to find like the proper plan in order to exploit our advantages in the position. But what are those advantages in the position? I would say that first thing that we always need to look at when we are evaluating the position is the position of the kings on the board. This king on h1 is absolutely not feeling that great, because bishop on c5 is taking the g1 square away, and there is also a rook which is looking towards the king. But I would say that there is one minor issue for black, and this is the pawn on h4, which closes the file for their rook. So in this position, black must be looking for a way to find even better coordination of his pieces, because what we can see that this queen on a8 is like terribly placed in sense of attacking the white's king. On another hand, our king, let's say black's king, feels perfectly safe compared to the white's king. Nobody is looking toward our king. The e-file is closed, so even though the king is in the center, that's not so problematical. Yeah, and coordination-wise, black is doing fine. Just we can always improve, of course. White's pieces are hardly we can say that they are very successfully working together. But it's a matter of time. It's a question of time. Again, chess is timing. And if we are able to execute our plan faster than our opponent, that will bring us success. Otherwise, no. So in this position, black started with move knight h5. Yeah, so idea or the threat, it's obvious. It's knight g3. And somehow white cannot really fight against this knight g3 move. What they can do, they can fight maybe against the bishop on c5. So white played bishop to e3. With that move, of course, what white achieved is that the king will be able to go to g1. Now black continued with knight g3 anyhow. White must capture. Black capture back, and king g1. So far everything was more or less logical, more or less clear. Now came the moment, now we reached the moment where black is basically playing preparational move. We can also call it a quiet move. Those are moves that are most difficult to spot during our calculation, yes, because it's not direct threat or something, but with these quiet moves we are simply preparing the final assault. And here this is move king e7. Now black, you can see, basically prepared himself the situation to execute this final assault on the same way as in the previous examples. Rook h1, it's a deadly threat, and unfortunately for white there are no useful moves here. There are a couple of options. Let's say he can take bishop c5, then we take, let's say play rook d1, and now we have this typical combination, yes, check on h2, king f1, and queen h1 mate. Instead of bishop c5, white could also try it with rook f2 d1 in order to giving f1 square for his own king to try to escape. It would not be sufficient, because black can give this check, another rook sacrifice, that queen can join the party, and after queen h2, king f1. Okay, it's not the same mating pattern as we have seen before, or executed the same way, because the f1 square is available, but there is queen h1, and after bishop g1 there is queen g1, you see, checkmate on the board, and you can see how important this bishop on c5 was during this attack. The last try, and the move that it was played in the game, was queen e1, and then of course we know already the situation. So white has basically lost in a typical manner. Okay, so this was it with Damiano's mate. Now we are moving forward to another important mating construction, which is called lawless mate. So lawless mate is a bit different compared to Damiano's mate, in sense of the square where we are going to deliver this important mating pattern. We are basically weakening the g7 square with the help of our f-pawn. You see, so here white, even though it's a rook down, it's able to execute a devastating mating attack by playing f6. We are threatening queen g7 checkmate. Black's only move is g6, and then after queen h6 it is impossible to stop queen g7 mate. Yeah, maybe an important detail to add: when we push or advance with our pawn to either f6, either f3 square, we are not only weakening the g7 square with it, but also the h7 square. So this pawn wedge, which is created on f6 square, plays an extremely important role in attack. Yeah, because we can, with the help of this pawn, deliver checkmate, like I said, on g7 or h7 squares, and it is also basically helping to execute kind of mating attack on the back rank. Let's go to another example, which is already a bit like more complicated, in sense that only one solution is correct here. You see, the g7 square here, it's very well under control of the rook on g8. So if white wants to win this game, he must win the game on the h7 square. And now the question is how this could be done. We have two options. One option is, of course, to bring our rook to the h file. However, that would fail because black can simply either capture the pawn on f6, either to play knight f8, and you see both vulnerable squares, g7 and h7, are in that case very well protected. So we need to find another way to finish the attack, and very commonly we are able to sack our queen or maybe some other piece on square h7 in order to open the h file. You see, now after king h7, rook h3, mate on the board. Let's go to another example where we can already see that white somehow brought his pieces into a play on a way that we can execute our mating pattern. Yes. So here the combination started with bishop g7, rook g7, f6. Now we are threatening with a mate, and after rook g8, again we have to be very careful because we always must be considering us and our opponent. Yeah, and if you look the position of the black pieces, yeah, especially this queen and the bishop here, they are looking towards the g2 square. We simply cannot play move rook h3 in this position. Yeah, of course our move would be extremely logical, as we are threatening with mate on h7. But again, we are slower because black can play rook e1, white must capture rook e1, and then queen g2 follows mate. You see, that would be really set end to this combination. Just playing one wrong move and we are gone. Yeah. Instead of that, we know already that this is the mating pattern that exists. Takes, give a check, he must cover, and mate on the board. Fantastic, right? And the next example, it's I'm using this example because it's a little bit like counterintuitive, in sense of that we need to understand that the pieces are not moving only forward; they can also move backward in order to find the way to occupy the desirable square. So we have in this position pawn on f6, which is extremely strong already. We have, of course, our queen already there where it belongs, but that's it for a moment. Yeah. So we need to find better support for our pieces. Yes. To continue with the attack, and move knight f3 looks like very nice. Black can play move queen f8, after which we have a very nice move in available, and this is move knight g5. You see, somehow black has threatened to take the white's queen, and white is just leaving it for free. So sacrifice, it's accelerator of the attack usually, yes, and so the same case is here. If black captures on h6, we have knight f7 mate. So one of the typical mates that we are also covering in a little bit later. The lawless mate could also be much more complicated, as it has been seen in the previous examples. Okay, we have like similar situation with the pawn on f6 already created, but still the pieces are pretty far away from the black's king, and it requires like important precision. So white started the attack with queen h6, threatening queen g7 mate. Black played rook g8, he covered the g7 square, and now it's time to start bringing another pieces in the attack. Rook c3 would be kind of very logical in order to meet queen d4 with taking on h7, king h7 and queen h3, so we have seen this mate already. But there is a bad news, because after rook c3, nobody forces black to capture on d4. Yeah, black must be thinking prophylactically. We must be thinking on the way to try to understand what is our opponent's threat, and considering that, black can play move e5. And now suddenly the attack is more or less gone. We can also see that our king is not having a great time on g1, rook on h1 as well. So suddenly the position would be just lost for white. Yeah, because there are no useful moves in this position. What's to play? If I'm moving the knight away, queen d1 follows. Otherwise, white loses the knight. So instead of playing rook c3, the correct way to execute the attack is to play knight f3, with the threat of knight g5, of course. If black, for example, plays queen h5, we are getting into the same situation as we have seen in the previous example. We can play knight g5, and no one can stop knight f7 mate. So for that reason, black must be playing g5. And somehow it looks like that our attack leads nowhere, because black's defense is very well organized or coordinated. But we have also some options as white, yes, and opening the file often leads to the correct way. Yes, so h4, the logic is very simple. If black is, let's say, capturing the pawn on h4, we are taking with the rook, and will be very hard for black to defend this position, because we have multiple resources available. I mean, queen f5 or queen e4 are possible defensive resources in this position, and in that case I think move like knight e5 looks absolutely beautiful, isn't it? Yes, because again we are threatening with mate on f7, and of course black cannot capture because queen h7 leads to mate. Yeah, so this is just one of the variations that are like possible. After h4, black played move e5 in order to meet h takes g5 with bishop f5. So sacrifice can work both directions, like attacking for attacking purposes, but as well for defensive purposes, like we can see it here. You see, so black has given a pawn in order to bring his piece to defend important h7 square. Now, how to continue? Yeah, we have like relatively good coordination, but still like something is missing. Yeah, because bishop like itself protects the pawn on h7. So white has this option to play g6. Now queen h7 again, it's a mating threat. Black must take with the bishop. There is no other option, because if they take with the rook, then we have queen h7 mate. So like I said, after g6, bishop g6 is the only option. And now knight g5. You see, and we are threatening now queen h7, bishop h7 with rook h7 mate. So most likely queen d3, it's a move that prevents this. But now white can execute or let's say finish off the game with relatively nice combination. If you wish, you can pause the video here, try to solve it on your own. Yeah. Okay, let's see solution together. White can take queen h7, of course. Yeah. After bishop h7, knight f7, a beautiful mate that ends the game. Yeah. Okay, so this was about the lawless mate. Let's continue our journey, exploring typical mating pictures or mating combinations. And the next typical mate are mates on the rook's files. Yes, so in order to execute this mating pattern, it's important to have an open rook file. And in this position, you see we are having situation with the opposite side castling. Both players are attacking on their own sides, and it's again question of time, who is faster. And in this position, white is faster because they have an option to give this check. So something very similar that we have seen in Damiano's mate. So this situation is a bit different to Damiano's mate because here the h7, it's basically supported by the knight. If king takes, we give this check, the queen helps, and there is a mate. Yeah, something similar we have already seen. If after rook h8 black is capturing with the bishop, again queen h1 will decisively win the game for white. Let's go to another example where we have now slightly different situation compared to the previous example. Here we have very complicated position. We can see that there are many pieces on the board. The white's king is, I would say, extremely vulnerable for a simple reason, because there is no escape route for this king. The e2 square is decisively taken by the bishop. But the question is now whether we are able to exploit this or not. And the answer is yes. I would again maybe suggest you to pause the video and try to solve first this example on your own, because the pattern, it's more or less very similar that we have already seen. Okay, let's see solution together. Black starts the combination with the queen sack, queen h1, white must capture, black takes, and there are two options, king g2 or rook g1. After rook g2 there is this mate, so much better chance for for white to survive this one is to play rook g1. But now black will simply play move rook g1, he would take this one and play bishop f3. So I use this example because of this basically coordination of the black pieces. How strong this coordination is, you can see on the board, because rook and the bishop are fantastic attacking tandem, especially bishop occupying the long diagonal and the rook an open h file. So this is like extremely typical situation that appears on the board like extremely often. Yeah, and we can see that here there is nothing white can do. Rook h1 is going to happen and white is getting mated. Nice, yes. Okay, let's continue with this example where we have white to play, and white can basically finish the game with nice combination again, and this combination starts with a queen sacrifice here. You see, white can take, we take on h3, and after king g7, well, it looks like the attack has reached the dead end, but it's not, because with bishop check we are forcing the king to go back to h7, and now bishop f8 follows mate. It's a beautiful combination. Again, you see the bishop is taking the g7 square away, and the rook is in control over the open H file. Well, let's continue with another typical mating pattern, which is so-called Anastasia's mate. This is one of the most beautiful one. Okay, yes, of course it's a question of taste, but here you see black gives this knight to check, and after king h1, again we have a queen sacrifice. You see, often in attack we can see this queen sacrifice decisively give us this advantage of winning time, yes, because with sacrifice we are often winning time. And you see, this is what we call Anastasia's mate. See, the g1 and g3 squares are taken away by the knight, and the h file, of course, usually by the rook. The same combination basically happened in the next example. Well, we have a bit more pieces on the board, and position is maybe much more concrete. Knight on g4, okay, it's a very good piece. White threatens to trade queens, and black is not very happy to enter the endgame, of course. So he found like beautiful combination with move knight d2. White must go king h1, and now, okay, there is no queen sacrifice on h2 square, but we can sack the queen like this in order to open the h file. Of course, white doesn't need to take back, they can play f3, but then knight g3 happens. King g1, knight f1, and after like king f1 there is queen f4. We are exploiting the pin, and this is an important detail here, because we are not going to lose our rook. So we are going to be up a rook in the endgame, and that means that we are just winning. But if white captures on g4, we can be sacrificing yet another rook. You see, so now we are opening the rank by the sacrifice, and then rook h4 checkmate. Absolutely beautiful. Let's see one more example on this topic. Knight g3. What a wonderful move this is. We are exploiting an unprotected queen, you see. The queen on e4 is under attack. So white has basically a couple of options, but all those options are bad. If they take queen, black will be giving this mate, knight d2. Smothered checkmate, kind of, yeah. Checkmate with two knights is not like often seen on the board. If they take the knight on d4, then knight d2 follows, and we have seen this combination already, yes? Now all the conditions are met, knight has occupied the e2 square, we are taking here, give a check. Now white can cover twice, but then we have mate on the board, yeah? It's a nice way. We still have to cover two more mates. One of those mates is so-called the smothered checkmate. The smothered checkmate is the mate where we are delivering mate with our knight. We have seen like two examples already while talking about lawless mate, and let's see how usually this is done. Yeah, it is usually done on either f7 or f2 squares. White is giving this check. Now king f8, of course, leads to queen f7. This is mate in one move. The other one here would be knight e7. But after king h8, now the typical mating mechanism to follow. We give one check, and now we have this double check, this cover check at the same time. Yeah, and double check is the most powerful among all checks, because the opponent has only one option, to move their king. And now after king f8, of course, we have this mate. But if they go king h8, now we have a wonderful queen sack on g8 square. And you see, by that, we have forced the opponent to recapture with one of his pieces. Usually this is the rook. And now all those three squares are basically taking space from their king. And now the knight can to deliver the mate, knight f7. Wonderful, yes. It's like typical mating situation. You see, we have now like one practical example where the situation is not very clear. If you would count material, you would realize that white is up a pawn. So, and white has also two bishops, and black has big pawn on d4, weak pawn on b5. So all those elements are talking in white's favor. However, as I already mentioned, we need to first look position tactically. And the problem is that after move knight g4, a lot of pieces, basically all of black pieces, are working together. And we are threatening knight f2 mate, right? The smothered checkmate. How can white fight against this? If they would play h3, we have moved queen h6. And look at now this bishop. It is spinning the pawn on g2, so we are deadly threatening queen h3. Surprise, but there is no sufficient defense against this move, and white can just resign. Because in the very next move, he is most likely getting mated. So after knight g4, white played bishop e1. Queen h6 again followed. If h3, we are giving this mate. Yeah, we have seen this already. So what white did was to play bishop g3. And now somehow it looks like everything is under control, just that it's not, because black can take queen h2, bishop h2, and knight f2 mate. Yeah, beautiful, right? Let's see one more. Smothered checkmate. You see here we have black on move, white threatens queen g7 mate. Position for black is winning, I think, different ways, but the most effective and direct is to take here, then give this check, forcing the rook going to f1. We give another check, and now we have this typical mechanism that we have seen already. Yeah, we play knight f2, king g1, knight h3, check here, and mate on f2. And let's see one more example before we finishing this chapter. And the smothered checkmate could happen also in the opening stage, believe it or not. So one example from Budapest Gambit. Budapest Gambit is starting with d4, knight f6, c4 and e5. Yeah, like people often play move like e6 in this position, maybe g6, c5, yes, d6 also. e5, it's a gambit, yeah. We will talk about gambit a lot during our course together. But let's see here how this mating possibility exists in that opening. If white captures, knight g4, bishop f4, knight c6. So you see white is protecting the pawn, black is attacking. We give this check, for example, knight d2 and queen e7. You see, so every single move is attacking move. White can play a3, of course, expecting black to capture on d2, but no, we can take on e5. And after, let's say, take, white is, of course, having a couple of options, but in case of taking on b4, you see, knight e3 follows follows mate. Yes, and it's a beautiful, beautiful end for our first chapter to conclude.